Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. On behalf of the Alumni Association, we're really thrilled to have you participate and all of our panelists. I'd also like to thank the Rockefeller College Dean Advisory Board for suggesting the idea for this panel. Thank you. Just a couple housekeeping items. On the bottom of your screen, you'll see two different things, a chat, which I already see that some of you are contributing in the chat. And then, so feel free to chat, introduce each other, but let's try to keep it to a minimum during the program. But also there is a question and answer section. So please feel free to add whatever questions you may have throughout the evening. I'll be monitoring those and we'll have some time to answer some of those questions later on. So I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce our panelists. I'd like to start with Ivan Bart, class of '85, president of IMG Models. Dena Quinones, class of '98, who's a yoga instructor and faculty member at Montclair State University. Dr. Mahaliel Bethea, class of '06, director of My Brother's Keeper. Shanelle Campbell, class of 2010, founder HippyKitten Decor. We have Michael Weiss, class of '88, partner Opus Point Partners. And our moderator this evening is Deb Stewart, who is one of our Alumni Association board members and also the Executive Director, Human Resources, City of New York. Thank you again. And now I'll pass it on to you, Deb.
As we're very much all aware, COVID-19 has very deeply affected our city. I'm sure all of us can recount many stories of how the pandemic has affected us each personally. But if it's one thing I know about New Yorkers is that we are resilient and we always push through. So while everyone is still adjusting to life and work, new ways of living, new ways of working, our hope is that today's discussion will help us in that regard. So without further ado, to maximize our time, I want to throw the first question out to all of the panelists. On a personal level, how has the pandemic affected your life in New York City? Ivan, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Dena, Mike, Shanelle, and then Dr. Bethea.
Well, you know, I think it went through different phases. I think when we first locked down, I was working remotely, and I found great pleasure in ending my day around 6 and taking my bike ride, because I always believe in getting some exercise. And I always found myself at a hospital, you know, standing outside and cheering our healthcare workers. And I think that'll be a memory that I will take forever. But I also knew that there was going to come a time that, you know, we're going to have to work around a virus. And I'm in that phase now. And I think, again, I applaud the city. New York City is incredibly resilient. And the restaurants, I mean, I just love that we have the outside seating. When you're walking through some neighborhoods, it feels almost very festive and very unlike this very challenging moment in time. So I'm very proud to live in this city, and we are going to overcome this, and you can see it in the resilience of New Yorkers.
Absolutely. Dena?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Well, what I can say is that it literally felt like the world had changed for me and my daughter. I have a 7-year-old. From one day to the next, everything I do personally or professionally is about human contact or being within vicinity of just being with people and for people. I teach professionally. I also teach yoga. And then I was also dealing with just literally from one day to the next, my daughter not returning to school. So really finding that adjustment in being able to go from doing everything in person to really having to course correct, right? There were a lot of times where I literally felt like with my colleagues, with my daughter's teachers and my daughter's school, because I'm on the board of the PTA as well, literally in every situation, it was flying a plane while we were building it, and really just trying to make sense of what just did not make sense on any or every level. And so it really took being flexible, practicing self-compassion, and really, I have to say, flexibility in every personal or professional situation where really having to modify human contact in such an enormous way is what I think I had to really tap into immediately. I was born and raised in New York City. I currently reside in New Jersey, but all of my immediate family lives in New York City. My parents, my elderly parents in particular. And so even though I was not living there, I was very much involved in New York, and very happy about the responsiveness on most levels to care for those where there were a lot of health disparities, as well as the resources that were provided to New Yorkers, as well as those of us here in New Jersey as well, I must add. And so I just want to say flexibility is the word that comes to mind when this question was first posed.
Thank you, Dena. Mike, how about you?
Sure. First, thanks for having me on the panels. Nice to meet everybody. Yeah, so on a personal level, it's kind of interesting. I think of a few things. One is I would say that our family, I would consider ourselves some of the COVID refugees. So we did have the opportunity to get out of the city. In fact, at the beginning of COVID, one part of my family was on vacation and the other part was sitting in New York City. And as they went to lockdown New York, around 15th, 18th or so of March, one half of us got out of New York, and we ended up quarantining in place outside of New York for a good part of that, the March to June timeframe. So fortunate enough that we had a place to be outside of New York during those challenging times. And then the other side of the personal is, unlike some folks, my kids are a little bit older now. So I had one who's actually graduating high school, but the other two are in college. And they were obviously sent home from college, and they had nothing. They couldn't leave the house. There's very little times that you could ever get 18 to 22-year-olds to actually hang out with you, let alone hang out with you for 3 to 4 months consistently pretty much without leaving the house, right? Other than to go for a bike ride or a run or whatever. I mean, we were in it together. So on a personal note, it's one of these situations where I felt uncomfortably fortunate that I had gotten some free family time that I would have never gotten but for this. So it's uncomfortable because so many people are suffering, but personally we got to enjoy each other in time. Now they're all back in college and I'm alone by myself again, but for the moment it was quite nice. We'll talk about the business stuff later, but from the personal side, it's kind of what I'd say. We did make it back to the city. I know Ivan was talking about the streets. I mean, it is one of the cooler times I've ever been in New York is now when we've gone out, you walk the streets and the restaurants are pouring out into the avenues and the streets. So it's a pretty cool time in New York City.
How about you, Shanelle?
You're on mute, yeah.
I think you're on mute. Uh-oh. You're frozen, Shanelle.
A little bit.
We'll go to Dr. Bethea and come back to you, Shanelle.
Oh, really?
All right.
Okay. Okay. Whoops.
Shanelle, is that you? All right, well, I guess I'll go. For me personally, it was very much so like Dena, it was just a big shift. I work in education. I just left being a school principal. I ride the subway to work every day. I'm from the Bronx. And so that's the borough that I rep. And so I'm used to just being in close vicinity with people and socializing with people. And so it just changed my, like, just the way that we deal with space, you know, riding the subway, being in restaurants, walking down the street, going to get food, you know. And so for me, it was coming from a place where in my personal life and in my professional life, I'm used to being very social and engaging with people. I had to shift the way to be social, right? Kind of thinking about, you know, some of us, most of us should be zoomed out by now, but at that time that was kind of, you know, the thing to start to do and rethink how to socialize. And it was also interesting personally because of all of the space, you know, I talk about space, but it gave space for people to start to march and protest, and being in New York at a time where, you know, it was, you know, people began to start to do that in large numbers was also, and it has also been a very memorable time for me. So.
Thank you. Shanelle, welcome back.
Can you hear me now? Is everyone good?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Everything was perfect, and right when I went to talk, it shut down.
Murphy's Law.
Thank you for having me, and also it's HippyKitten, by the way, not Happy Kitten, but anyway. So as far as the start of the pandemic to now, for me personally, and I kind of on all levels, you know, while I'm building this design business, I do work freelance. So my freelance business was like a shift because it went from
You're back on mute.
What's going on?
Okay, we can hear you now.
Good now?
Yes.
Okay, should I start over? I don't know where we left off.
Yeah, you could start over.
Okay. Well, I was just saying, on both levels, you know, I work freelance, independent of me building my design business. And so from my freelance business, how I make my personal money, you know, everything went from me helping people move, building furniture, doing really physical work and being in people's homes to, you know, and helping them professionally organize, to the exact opposite of that. It's like nobody wanted anybody near anybody. So now I'm just in this place where everything I'm doing is contactless. It's not necessarily the work that I loved doing. You know, fortunately, that did pick up a few months later, but obviously it was a bit of a transition for me because I'm like, okay, well, even in this, I'm looking at my way that I personally make money change, but then I'm like, wait, but how is my design business going to change? And like all these other wheels I had to start getting in motion. So it was really, it's been for the last few months, just a time of reflection, of spending a lot of time in nature. I've never been to so many parks since this started. I'm going to like different parks. I'm like, okay, I always go to Prospect Park. Let me look up, you know, a different park in Queens. I've just been trying to find better ways to explore the city and the nature and the things that the city has to offer that I've always taken for granted. It's been a lot of gratitude and, you know, going inside, and especially a ton of self-help right now. Like I went into therapy. Next thing you know, I was like hiring a financial coach. Now I'm in like a business strategy program, and I'm just like a self-help junkie right now. So I will say that those are like some of the like positive things that have happened for me personally. And obviously, you know, there have been shifts that are now it's like a domino effect. So it's like there's a shift here, then a shift there, and you're kind of just reevaluating everything. So I'm taking this time really to just continue to step back so that I can come back even better when, you know, whenever things officially open all the way back up.
Great, thank you. I know most of you alluded to this in your first answer. And for me, professionally, one of the big adjustments that I had to make was time management. I'm used to working until the job gets done. So when you don't have those boundaries working from home, it's difficult to manage your time. And you could guiltily, I did this at least a few times. You could end up spending hours and hours and not sleeping, just hours running into each other. So I would like to ask each of you, what adjustments have you had to make, either personally or professionally, to be in order to be successful throughout the pandemic? We'll start with Mike, and then we'll go to Dr. Bethea.
Yeah, I'd like to say that I changed a lot, but I was already working remotely and kind of working around the clock. So for me, it just meant that everyone else was doing the same thing now, which was kind of nice in the company. I've got 250 employees, and now I don't mind calling them at 11 o'clock at night or 6 o'clock in the morning or over the weekends, since time doesn't matter anymore. It's kind of nice, and I'm obviously texting them all night long, so they hate me now even more. But yeah, so I think people are just kind of getting onto my schedule, which was, lots of remote. If I had to go to the office, I would obviously go into the office, but I was always I had no boundaries, just working whenever it needed to be done. So I didn't really change a lot. I think a lot of people changed around me in the company, which, like I said, I think, we'll get to this, I'm sure, but the productivity of our company has gone up probably twofold since the start of the pandemic.
That's great. Congratulations.
Thanks. They hate me.
How about
They hate me, but great. Thanks.
How about you, Dr. Bethea?
Yeah, so I took a different approach to that. When I was a principal and I managed a building, large team, I made it a priority to be mindful of time, and because our job, particularly as educators, is so total body, right? It's physical, it's mental. Really modeling for my team the need to disengage from that work to take care of themselves and their families was a key component of me, and the organization that I ran. Right before COVID, I now get a new job where I'm not managing anyone. I'm a team of one, essentially. And I decided to still keep those systems in play, really to protect myself, to protect my energy, but also to just kind of enforce and support kind of my work and engagement with other teams and other groups and other divisions. And so for me, it hasn't changed, right? But what has always been maintained is one, weekends. I used to have a BlackBerry. I used to put that in a drawer somewhere. Now, because everything goes on my regular phone, I couldn't do that as much, but no email responses on the weekends, no work phone calls on the weekends. Very mindful about what close of business means in my world. That helped me say same, because now that I'm in my home office right now, like I could just be sitting here and do work all day and because I'm home all day. And so that was very important to me, just making sure that I kept the same norms that I would if I was working downtown.
Thank you. Dena, how about you?
So for me, my biggest initial adjustment was my self-care. So prior to the pandemic, I was already working quite often from home anyway. So I would say, depending on the week, half the week I would be working from home, half the week I would be on campus, but my daughter would be in school, right? And so there's a totally different dynamic when I'm working from home and we're figuring out the homeschooling thing, everyone together in our communities. And so for me, one source of my self-care was hot yoga. And so that was immediately from one day to the next, ripped from my life in a way that was initially really traumatizing, because it's not only yoga, even though I love yoga, part of my self-care and what I look forward to was practicing in the heat in my yoga community, which I love. And so that was stripped away from all of us, and it took a toll. And had a little bit of a domino effect. So I had to figure out new ways of self-care while managing the highest level of anxiety I've ever had to manage probably in life to this point, with all of the competing priorities and adjustments that had to be made given this unexpected pandemic. I also work in public health. So with that, and I know we'll get to this a little later in terms of opportunities, but given being in the field of public health, now everybody wanted and was looking to me and my colleagues, from family members to the media to other departments on campus. It was, they were looking to us for all the answers that CDC didn't have or still doesn't have. So for me, it was really time management, like already mentioned, creating boundaries as Debbie mentions in terms of having start and end times. I had to literally create bedtimes because if not, I would wake up and literally not know what day it was. My daughter wouldn't know what day it was. And so we had to create routines within, our home that never had to be created before. So that was really the major adjustments in terms of time management and prioritizing work, because there were new shifts and new priorities, but the old ones still didn't go away. And then also managing self-care, which is what allows me to always, show up in the best way that I can. And so those were the biggest adjustments for me.
Shanelle?
Okay. So my biggest adjustment was definitely the pace at which I move. I've lived in New York all my life, and it's just this hovering pressure and hustle and bustle, kind of just constant like tension and anxious energy that is just looming all the time, like that cloud, and this was the first time that I had to say, like, there's no rush. There's no timeline. Nobody even knows what day today is. So literally relax, because, we've all been forced to slow down. And maybe this is a time or a chance for you to assess how you move in general, because maybe you're just moving fast and not really doing anything in particular half the time, right? So I've just been having to be more intentional, being more like the tortoise, less like the hare, as best as I can, and really just getting more comfortable with not doing something. Just that constant feeling that you have to just be doing something, and realizing that it's a lot of times just been for the sake of doing something, but I haven't actually been productive. It just looked like I was just doing stuff. So really being more intentional with how I move, so that I am doing something that does matter. And even when I'm sitting there, that too, just sitting there does also matter for me to be productive.
You definitely raise a great point, Shanelle. I think as New Yorkers, we are always used to just going. So during the pandemic, when all of us had to take a step back and just sit and just be, that is a really, really great point. As I saw Dena just mentioned, living is doing. So thank you for highlighting that. Ivan, how about you?
Well, my business is very social, and we're managing talent. So, to interact with talent, and immediately, also leading a team, and the way we work is we're in an open floor plan. So that promotes a lot of conversation and communication. And so if somebody is not available for a particular job, we can immediately all look at each other and suggest somebody else. So I had to immediately figure out, okay, how do I, the amazing thing is, like, it really pushed the technology. So, like, even the fact that we're all sitting wherever we're sitting and having a Zoom call, and we're reaching the student body, and we're reaching each other, is really one of those miraculous things that happened during COVID. And for us, keeping regularity. So immediately, I immediately started a Zoom call at 10 and one at 5 every day. And the 10 was everybody's intentions, and what our plans were for the day. And at 5 was a wrap up of what we all did each day. And that just started to take a life of its own in the connectivity of our team. So without having all sitting together, we were actually in this regimented schedule. And seriously, for the heightened events that have happened during COVID, political events, the health events, but most importantly for us, the murders of so many Black men and women, was something, in our group, very powerful and important to talk about. So having these scheduled meetings every day at 10 and 5, it just suddenly took a life of its own, that we're not going to talk about business today. Today, let's actually focus on our feelings about what is going on in the world. And And then also it made me much more conscious about how we actually interact with our talent, and also reaching out to our talent. They were alone and afraid, and very afraid by seeing people being murdered. And then it became a whole other thing for me personally, is that, I've believed, I've been working in inclusion and diversity in the fashion industry through our talent roster, but it made me actually realize that the work cannot be done until the influencers and the actual decision makers change. So it's put me on a whole path about really building creative talent, Black, BIPOC talent, and it's led me to so many different people and interesting talent themselves, and we signed a lot of interesting talent during this period. So it's been a really tremendous, I mean, like, through challenges, we definitely evolve and we learn and we grow. And I think for myself, it's been a big learning experience about how to be a better talent representative, and also to really, even though you might not understand somebody's experience or shared experience, it's important to learn and to listen and to reflect and to really hear. It's been a very important time. That's all I have to say.
Thank you for sharing that. We appreciate your candor and being so open and honest. And you are absolutely correct. This period has been one where so many of us have had the opportunity to be more open and more vulnerable. And, we often live our lives on autopilot. So, I think for this period, those blinders had to come off, and people saw the very naked realities of our society. So that was, I think, one of the good things, if there can be good things to come out of this, that was definitely one of the good things, to peel away the blinders from society. Mike and Dr. Bethea, did you all think about, or did you realize early on how serious this pandemic would be for your organizations? Like in the very beginning, March, did you at all think how serious it would be for your organizations?
So, Dr. Bethea, I'll go first. You want to go? So,
sure. I mean, I'll go. No.
Go.
Oddly enough, I was working. I work in our central office, and they started to be around like that mid-March time. They started to be whispers around the office, because you have to remember the DOE runs very much so like the Postal Service, like rain, sleet, or snow, like schools are open. If New York City folks like can rely on nothing else, they know that school's gonna be open. And so, it's a huge decision to decide to close the doors for 1 million children. And those decisions don't go lightly. And frankly, they're huge dilemmas that just, you don't win as an organization. But no, I did, when this first was happening, I thought, okay, well, maybe we'll be out for a little bit of time and then we'll come back. The school that I had founded was also having its first graduation in June. And so we were like, okay, they won't cancel graduations. They won't like do these things. I was graduating, I got my doctorate in May and I was graduating. And so thanks. So yeah, the quick answer is no. I didn't think it was going to be all these months later that we're still grappling with with not only what we're seeing in our present, but also kind of trying to figure out what the future is going to look like for schooling, you know, in particular, which is my field. But I would imagine in all different walks and organizations and professions, just trying to figure out what does this new, you know, people keep using the word new normal, so I guess I'll subscribe, but kind of what is going to be the new norm. So.
Yeah, so for me, I'd say the answer is yes and then no. So yes, I thought it was going to be horrific. And then no, I was like, it's not going to be so bad. And here were my data points. So we manufacture pharmaceuticals globally. And so we have manufacturing facilities in China, Korea, and India. And at the beginning of the pandemic, China shut down. One day we had drugs that were supposed to be shipped to our facilities in the US. And the next day they said, no one's around, everyone went home. They went home and they're not coming back. So of course we went into freak out mode. So that's where I say yes. At first I was like, oh, this is going to be really bad. This is going to be really bad. Mm-hmm. And then, and this is still late January, by mid-February, China was back online. They went back to work, shipments were coming in again, and everything was normal. And Korea, in between there, also had like a 2-week period where they went down and then they came back online. And at that point, India actually hadn't had any issues. And so I said, oh, then I went to no, which was, well, if they could be back online in 2 weeks, we'll go home for 2 weeks. And then everyone will go back to work and it'll be like nothing ever happened. Unfortunately, I'm still not clear, to be quite honest, how they were able to spend 2 weeks out and now the rates of infection there are so low. And we spent 3 months out of the office and continue. Now we're at 6 or 9 months or whatever it is at this point. And we still have not been able to contain this. So at the beginning, thought it was going to be really bad. Then I figured no big deal. And then I woke up and realized I was wrong. So yeah, it's a lot worse than I expected in the end.
Working in HR, I knew it was going to be serious, but like Mike, I did not think that it would last 9 months. I thought, oh, we'll go home for a few weeks and then everyone will return, but didn't think it was going to last this long. We're going to switch gears a little bit. And this question is directed to Ivan and Shanelle. How have you been able to innovate within your respective industries during this environment?
Shanelle, you want to go first?
No, I was busy taking myself off video. I guess I'll go first so I don't touch anything else. So, you know, I don't want to answer one of the later questions, but, you know, the goal in my head has always been to ultimately be able to have a large part of the business be e-design, to be able to help anyone from anywhere in the world. So it's been a lot of pivoting, I would say. And I guess that's kind of the self-help stage that I'm in now with the business coach, because we're really just trying to like nail down that like perfect type of package for a client to be able to help them virtually and really just feel like we're holding their hands as much as we can, even though we physically may not be. And I think this whole time has just been a lot about being able to pivot, being able to shift quickly, or just being able to like have a plan A, but a very steady plan B and plan C, just because anything can happen at any moment. And I think the main thing that we've learned in this time is just that you expect the unexpected. Like I just starting my days and ending my days without any expectations, because literally anything can change at any moment. And we just have to be inherently prepared for that, you know, if we're going to say that we're great at what we do. So yeah.
I think for the fashion industry, it's interesting. Most people assume, you know, fashion is a very, you know, forward-thinking industry, when in fact, a lot are very stuck in the tried and true. And, you know, it was very apparent too with everything going online and digital. a lot of the magazines, you know, and a lot of the fashion brands really were stuck. And I think this, you know, like I said, technology really, you know, just pushed everything forward. So going forward, I mean, you know, we're looking into technology as a way also in our talent representation. We are, you know, looking also at digital plays and in gaming for our talent. But I also think, like I said, the most important thing too, I mean, the thing that I had been working on for the last decade now too, was that I felt that you know, I was really important to talk to brands about representation and about what customers are they really looking for. And I felt like fashion had an opportunity that if you don't see yourself, you know, you feel like another. So that it was very important for brands to diversify. And so in age, race, size, gender, and really again pushing through for the last decade on that. Moving forward, I think the pivot again is on really, you know, inclusion riders and making a very diverse, you know, interesting environment to create art, because that's also part of fashion is the creation of art, and to have mixed viewpoints as a starting point creates, I think, more excitement and activity. And so I'm really committed going forward again on how to bring the fashion industry into the 21st century in so many ways.
Thank you. Speaking of creative, I know this period has forced us all to be more creative and innovative in our personal lives as well as our professional lives. And with that being said, we do have a few students on the phone on the Zoom call with us today. So Dena, I would like to ask you, having managed the internship program at Montclair, what advice would you give to students in this environment about navigating internships, securing internships, etc.?
So I think when it comes to students and in general, before I could even address that, I had to manage anxiety. I had to manage fear. I had to manage all the questions that come along with, you know, will I graduate, right? The logistical questions. And then, okay, well, now I have to do an internship and I have to be on site. So what is that going to look like? And so I usually start by just encouraging students to stay informed, but also, you know, what you don't see on the news, stay informed, but focus on the positive. What you're not seeing on the news is you see wash your hands, wear a mask. We all know that those are some best defenses, right? But I always start and I encourage students to practice self-care. How are you taking care of yourself, your mind, your body, your emotion, physically, from what you eat to what you drink to what you're reading or how much TV you're looking at, right? Because that's where it starts. And that's when we address that. And then just manage manage everything, right? And then I also, one of the courses I teach is Introduction to Fieldwork and Professionalism. So a challenge was that professionalism went out the window with the pandemic, right? And what that means. You know, one example is that my students previously were not allowed to do remote internships on the undergraduate level. And so we had to readjust that, right? We had to pull our students off the site, still have them complete their internship. And so what I encourage students is to take care of themselves so that they can continue to roll with the punches, because everything is changing day to day. Internship for all of my students has looked differently from the spring to the summer to this fall and now to spring 2021. Because of the pandemic, everything looks different. So in order to prepare yourself for all of the changes, and most internship programs have, whether it's graduate or undergraduate, have changed or modified their rules and regulations for graduation accordingly. In my school, we're an accredited program, so we had various bodies to answer to in terms of what was appropriate, acceptable to meet accreditation standards. And in all of that, everything that we knew and what was normal prior to March was thrown out the window, right? And so one example that I always say is that we had a site visit Before the pandemic, a site visit was never conducted virtually. My department and my job, we were the first ever for CFA accreditation to engage in a virtual site visit. So what I say and what I encourage students is to take care of themselves. Do not compare productivity, right? And so I think that right now is focusing on what are some of the positives, right? Even though there may be a lot of adjustments and a lot of things that are new, you know, what are just some of the little victories, some of the little things that you can look to for encouragement, right? Knowing that, yes, things are different, things are changing daily, but, you know, as students, you know, and I know I don't speak just for Montclair State, all universities are supporting their students, are supporting each student's endeavor for graduation and for what they're trying to accomplish to meet their degree requirements while dealing with the pandemic, while dealing with the Black Lives Matter movement, right? And so I also pay particular attention to check in with my students of color, because what we have to deal with is very different, right, than our counterparts. And so I always make sure that that space is held and that our students of color are really held and acknowledged and seen in a way that they need to be seen to be able to show up as a student. So I approach students with transparency and authenticity, just letting them know, listen, I'm trying to figure this out too. We're all trying to figure this out. We are all in this together. And so, but with that, I had to, you know, then come back to, I'm known for being very firm but fair with, okay, now that being said, these are the expectations, right? In terms of these are the options that we've provided. Now, how can we support you in making the necessary decisions? Like I said, my students also had, because we are the Department of Public Health, had the additional experience, interesting enough, of their family members and even at their job, whether it was working in a health, in a healthcare facility, the health department, or even at like Old Navy or Starbucks, right? Everyone was looking to them because they were public health students for answers that really nobody had. So what I just tell students is to remember to be grounded, to access support, to seek the support that you may need, and whether that is from different social networks, your advisors, your counselors, just basically seek the support that you need. Don't compare your productivity, and just really continue to be flexible and know that we're all figuring out what this new normal is going to be together. But in terms of internships, what I can say from my experience is that a lot of not only schools, universities, colleges, but also internship sites that will host our interns have also taken on that same flexibility. So there have been a lot more opportunities for our students because of the flexibility and the shift in allowing virtual, hybrid, or totally on-site internship opportunities. So really, just again, encouraging students to take care of themselves and seek the support is the number one, is where I start, is with students in general.
Thank you, Dena, for the insight. Do any of our panelists have anything to add in terms of internships at your particular company, or any advice that you would give to prospective students who are seeking internships in this climate?
Well, I would like to give a shout out to Jocelyn Darko, who graduated this year, who was an intern at IMG. I hope she's watching. You know, I'm excited by people who are excited by fashion, and for her, I came to visit the school, and she was part of this group, a fashion group, and she had so much interest in it, and she was, you know, when there's a star, she was the brightest in the room, and you know, and I was very excited to connect her with our internship program, which then eventually led to a freelance position during New York Fashion Week. So the opportunities are there, and you know, like Dena was saying too, like, you know, make sure as students reach out for support and find out what these opportunities are, because there's plenty of opportunities out there. And Mary Johnson, who I don't think she's here with us tonight, but a big shout out to her too for connecting us all and bringing me back to my alma mater, where I was able to meet some very fascinating students. And we're very open to having, you know, for mentorship and to find people that are interested in the fashion space.
The only thing I'd add, we don't currently have a internship program, but the only advice I'd give to anyone who's looking for an internship is, you know, be aggressive, be bold, send out, you know, hundreds, maybe even thousands, whatever it takes. Find industries that you're interested in, companies that you're interested in, find names of people, network through any possible connection you can get through. Get one person's name, this person recommended I give you, send you a note, anything you could do, but you have to be aggressive. I mean, everyone wants those positions, and the ones who are going to get are the ones who are talented and aggressive.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mike, Ivan, and Dena. Does anyone else have anything to add in terms of advice or tips for students seeking internships?
Yeah, I do. I would say don't underestimate the power of your social networks, and something like the Albany Alumni Associations. You know, like New York City is full of young professional organizations, and these organizations can get you set up with the right people in the right spaces at the right times. And so I would say, like, when you live in New York, take advantage of the space, the people, and the desire for folks to network and grow. And so don't underestimate your social networks.
Agreed. I was having a conversation with one of my sorority sisters who recently graduated, and she indicated that her internship had actually fallen through, but she was hesitant to utilize her social networks because she felt as though she didn't want to just ask for something without being able to give anything in return. But I agree with you, Dr. Bethea. You have to utilize your social networks, and a closed mouth doesn't get fed. So in order to ensure that, you know, you're maximizing your opportunities, you definitely have to reach out and engage, because some people may not even know that you're looking for an internship or looking for an opportunity. So the best way to do it is to promote yourself and to leverage your networks.
I just wanted to add something really quickly is
Sure.
Sometimes students ask, well, where do I look for an internship? And something that I say across all disciplines is I say, look for your internship like you're looking for a job. And if there is a job opening and there is a position that you are really interested in and you really feel connected to it, this is what I want to do, this is the type of job I want, I encourage students to call, reach out to that employer and ask if they can extend an internship in that scope of work where they are hiring. And sometimes as an intern, particularly at a graduate level, you're able to provide a skill set and knowledge that can then lead into full-time employment. So I always say, look for an internship like you look for a job. And then, like Michael said, be aggressive in reaching out and expressing your interest and why you can be a great intern.
Thank you. The time flew. We are almost out of time. So before we go, I wanted to ask all our panelists one final question. You know, we do hear a lot about the negative things that come out of the pandemic. What for each of you are some of the positives that have come out of the pandemic for each of you? I know some of you alluded to it in your previous responses. So I just wanted to end on a positive note and your hopes for, you know, life in New York City in the future. We'll start with Shanelle.
Okay. Yeah, so one of them, I'm going to focus on the positives because, I try not to just look at things in a negative light, because there's always a little some glimmer of light always. And I want to say right now, besides being resilient, being resourceful has really just been the biggest positive that I've seen, for myself personally, and kind of for everyone around me, and what I've been seeing across my social networks and across the city in general. It's like, I have friends right now who are like, okay, well, the bars were closed. I'm going to teach myself how to make a margarita. And I go to my friend's house and her husband's like, hey, I'm going to make you a margarita. And there's like salt on the rim and everything. So I'm like, okay, well, this is something that was good and productive from this time. I know I stopped drawing when I was younger, and there's a bit of like trauma around that. And I decided to start picking that back up. And I've been doing that regularly, to the point that we're using some of my art in our projects. So I think, when you think about having time to reflect and be still and slow down, with that comes going inward and then pulling something out of that, because like there's so much more in there that maybe, because we're moving so fast, because we're in this kind of fast-paced environment, we're trying to work, we're trying to be with family, friends, we're trying to do all these different things, we're not really tapping all the way into our individual fullest potential. And I think some really great ideas and things, and really just better people are coming out of this situation and this time. So yeah, resourcefulness is the main point for me.
How about you, Mike?
Yeah, I was just taking a few notes as I was trying to remember all the good things. We're trying to say all the good things. So clearly the family time has been, spectacular, irreplaceable time, actually. But with that, I would say I've also upped my social giving, giving back a lot more than the past, sort of it's giving me an opportunity to think about how lucky I am during this whole pandemic, and we try to give a lot more to others. So that's been a nice part of it. I think everyone in the family has enjoyed giving to folks. I lost 15 pounds. I'm in the best shape of my life. I feel like that's pretty good too. I can claim out that opportunity to work out. And I was on the business side. I know it sounds like I was in the minority in terms of I got a separate note from Bill Roller yelling at me like I was some sort of ogre to my people. But yeah, I think my business is dramatically more efficient. I mean, in terms of how much travel, I feel terrible for the airlines and the hotels, because they'll never get the same business back from us, at least. But the travel that my teams used to go on, because they thought they had to be there, and maybe they did at the time, but now the other side, the people who are receiving them, one, they don't want to see anybody. Two, they're happy to do it on Zoom now, and everyone's not comfortable with it. So people in my company, they travel less, which actually has made them happier. They commute less, which has made them happier. And so when I call them late at night, they're not so unhappy when I do that to them. And then the last thing I'll say, one of the greatest changes of all, I hope will be, it hasn't happened yet because there's no more conferences, but I do go to a lot of conferences. And invariably, you go to these conferences and you have these meetings, and you sit down in a meeting and someone's got a cold, or they could even have the flu, and they don't even care. They show up at these meetings and they're sneezing on you, they're coughing on you, and then you go home and you're sick, and you get everyone sick around you. Whether we ever go back to those meetings, I won't miss them. But if I do go back, I'm never shaking anyone's hand again. And if they come into the room sneezing or coughing, I don't think anyone will do it again, because they're so now, I feel like most people have now been programmed, like if you go outside and you cough, you're like, oh my God, I'm going to get beat up, right? So I assume no one's going to show up at those conferences like that again. But if they do, I'm kicking them out immediately. I'm not going to be polite enough to sit there while they're coughing and sneezing on me. So I think that's been a positive change. And I think overall, I think there'll be less flu, there'll be less colds transmitted if people, continue to keep some of these hygiene practices in place, which I think are net positive.
Absolutely. You mentioned social giving, and I think that was one amazing thing that came out of the pandemic, because when Albany students had to go home, there became a need for many of them to get funding and resources. And I think the Albany alumni community banded together and donated in droves to that initiative. So I was very overwhelmed and pleasantly surprised to see how many alumni donated to student relief during COVID. So that was obviously one of the great things to come out of COVID. Even though students had to go home, they could rely on the university, as Dena mentioned earlier, to support them even while they were home. Dr. Bethea, how about you?
I think one awesome thing that came out of this was reconnecting to people. Whether it was Zoom or house party or whatever the thing was, I just thought it was really great to see family members that I haven't spoken to, in a long time, or reconnecting for, friends from undergrad. We have like a standing Thursday house party, right? Just kind of that reconnection piece was awesome. I think the second thing was watching people and watching myself reimagine what work and socializing looks like. We did our students' graduation virtually. I would have never thought that would be something that would be powerful, but it was. And just kind of seeing, very similar to what Mike is saying, like kind of like the, some things we thought we needed, that maybe you don't need that. That was nice. I think those two things were, and also that self-care piece and that health piece. So, I was like, oh, I'm gonna do the extra workout. I'm gonna wake up in the morning and like stretch and like, that kind of stuff. Just more self-care. I too have lost weight, Mike, not 15 pounds, but eventually. But those are the three things that just, I think, really have come out as positives in this whole situation.
Dena and then Ivan, we are a little short on time, but if you have anything to add to what others have already said, we'd love to hear it.
Sure. So I think, personally, I did enjoy spending more time with my daughter than with family members within our family bubble when we were comfortable enough to see each other. I replaced my hot yoga with just really having fun with essential oils and really other ways of stress and other modalities of yoga that I kind of put to the side. Professionally, I think that, again, in the Department of Public Health, we have been given the credit where it had not been due in other worlds, and I'll say it that way. And so it was really nice to see public health being given the attention that we have been given over the recent months. I also co-direct an organization, Stronger Tomorrow, and where our initial mission was to address the health disparities for women of color as it relates to being able to take care of themselves, mind, body, and soul, physically, mentally. We found ourselves really just promoting all of those organizations that supported Black, Indigenous people of color. And what we found is that we started holding space for not only women, but men as well. And we also becoming prevalent in the Black Lives Matter movement, holding space for having these difficult conversations around definitions. What does it mean to be Black, brown, of color? Like, what does all that mean? And not only supporting women, but finding that men also need support. So we've expanded and are expanding our services with a farther reach, which is really exciting for us. And so I'll stop there because I can go on with a lot of positives, but it was a pleasure being here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Dena.
I'll also, agree with Mike on, I think, if I ever go backstage to a fashion show again, I'll be wearing a mask probably. There's lots of kissing, hugging, and I was probably sick 3 or 4 times a year, and I have not had a cold. I have not had any problems. And I've been all healthy, knock on wood, during COVID. And, so that is a positive. I think definitely better hygiene in when you're dealing with social interactions. And and also again, the closeness of family and friends, and really, appreciating family and friends. And I married my partner of 18 years this year. So like,
Oh, congratulations.
what else are you gonna do? Like, we were bored one afternoon. Like, why don't we get married? Okay. So, there's been some really good stuff. And again, there's been tremendous amount of learning and evolution and change. And, I think people are definitely woke and ready for, life without COVID, and ready to do good things for themselves and for the world. I really do think that this is, we're on to something new.
I could not have said it better myself, Ivan. Unfortunately, I would love to continue this conversation, but we are out of time. It has been a great discussion, and my pleasure meeting all of the panelists. And I would like to thank the Alumni Association for coordinating this event, and as well as the panelists for such an insightful conversation. Thanks to everyone who tuned in today. I hope you're leaving inspired and encouraged about the future of New York City, and just the future of the world in general. And I hope you are taking with you some self-care practices, or the positive elements that have come out of COVID. So thank you so much for joining us. It has been my pleasure, and good night.
Good night,
Thank
everyone.
Thank you.
Nice meeting
Thank you for the
everybody.
opportunity.
Thank you to all the panelists.
Nice meeting you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.